Okay, thank you. Okay, so today's session title is Smart City Solutions in Central Eastern Europe. My name is Andrew Ocon, and I'm a representative of the MCX Group. I'm Director of Innovations, and I have some excellent panelists with me, starting with Justyna Król, CEO of Urban Workshops. She's a social innovator and urban development practitioner. Hello, Justyna. We
Hello,
have
everyone.
Artur Celiński, co-founder and deputy director and chief of Magazine Miasta.
Hello.
And we have Vadim Melnik, founder and CEO of Drone Hub, passionate about machine learning, artificial intelligence, and obviously drones. We saw actually a solution that's particularly interesting because I never actually seen an autonomous drone that can fly and it's legal. So. So moving on to our session, I need to just mention that today's session is powered by the MIT Enterprise Forum for Central Eastern Europe. So in my opinion, we have the best people and the best team to talk about smart cities, startups, and startups in the smart city environment particularly. So the first question is, what kind of smart city solutions have been implemented in Central Eastern Europe and in Poland, in your opinion? What are the most interesting and the most successful? So, Artur?
Okay, thank you for the question. Thank you for the invitation. And of course, we have a plenty of solutions that are implemented right now in our cities and our countries. And of course, some of them are boring. For me personally, like that we put a smart piece of technology, like a smart sensor, smart network, and so on into our sewer system or heat system, electricity system.
I personally have a smart washing machine, and I don't have any idea how to use it. So
yeah, but the city invests a lot of money because they need to control their resources, and they are convinced by the big businesses that if they put a lot of sensors, they're gonna be smarter. But this is not kind of smart city tools or innovation that are really turning me on, because I'm a big fan of that technology that use the technology to make people smart. For example, the startup Early that measure the quality of air. A few years ago, the CEO of the Early told in the interview that not many local government wants to cooperate with them, and it's not because of that they was afraid of innovation or something like that. They were afraid because the Early and other similar systems give you a lot of data that make people smarter, that make people they know how bad quality of air they have in their neighborhood. They start thinking about that. So that topic could become a part of the political agenda. Someone could win an election because of that. Someone could lose an election about that. They need to do something because of that. Because before that, we have just a glimpse of that. Oh, the air is not really good. But probably most of us were thinking that, okay, this is like a couple of days of the year. Then we have a data, we have a very live data day by day, and it occurs that like 100 days in the year with the bad quality air. So this is the knowledge, this is the power. And other smart city solution like a million My Tree Map. It's a kind of new services that they just put every tree in Poland into the system. They know exactly what kind of tree you have in your neighborhood, what is the condition of the tree, on the health of the tree. So this is a lot of knowledge. This is not all power. And then you can just use it and ask yourself if we have enough trees, or our government or local government take care of the tree in very proper way. And if not, what we should do about that. So I really like this kind of innovation, that smart city innovation, that make people smarter and make people more powerful. And there's a lot of.
So what you're trying to say that we should focus on data and used in a smart way. So Justyna, what do you think about this? So I think most of the startups right now are focusing on processing or gathering some kind of data to use it in a smart way. But is this smart city? So I think we need to combine the smart data with a smart city. I would like to know your opinion on this topic.
Thank you. To an extent, I second what Artur just said, meaning there's plenty of solutions that focus on sourcing, aggregating data that basically help us better understand how our complex systems in cities operate, what is functional, what's dysfunctional, and all of that. I think we can look at these solutions in stages, and the most basic stage is this one. Access to data early is one of my favorite examples, also because it's slowly but surely gaining ground. So it's access to information. That's level one, right? But then I think the next levels that make these solutions more and more smart city solutions are the ones that, one, engage you in an interaction with a city. So one thing is knowing, second thing is being able to do something about the thing that you know. And it can be fixing city's problem, but it can be fixing your own challenges when you function within the city. And then the third stage, from my perspective, is actually having impact in a more sort of systematic way or systemic way, being it somewhat becoming somewhat part of how the city functions. Because if you look at this sort of smart city market, there's different owners of solutions and there's different users of solutions. And from that perspective, if we find a way to plug or basically join individual users with institutional users and make this cooperation really effective, then we're talking about really a smart city. And this aspect of listening to how the city feels, it also in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the environment, but also in terms of general well-being, health of citizens, is very important. And when you look at various organizations that investigate smart cities or try to sort of bring the concept to these next levels, you can, for example, look at Demos Helsinki, which is now exploring what they call humble governance. And humble governance is around that. It's around using the data that Arthur was just mentioning, but also getting in alignment with the communities so that we actually apply technologies that make most sense. Because one of the things, and we can talk about it later as well, one of the things that I see with smart city solutions, not only in our region, also beyond, is that they quite often treat symptoms rather than problems. So we would be looking for solutions that help you find a better parking space in the city. Well, that's a symptom, right? Lack of parking spaces for individual vehicles is not really the problem, right? There is a deeper issue with mobility around cities. So I think there's a lot to be done, and we can look at it in these sort of progressive stages of excellence, if you will.
Okay, so we already talked about solutions. So identifying problems and identifying needs by the cities is very important. So we can have a concrete solution for a concrete problem made by a startup or a company. But how do you perceive the preparation of the cities here in Central Eastern Europe to implement smart city solutions? I think Justina already mentioned one of the problems, that the cities look at a particular problem, a particular case, and try to solve it. But sometimes it's a part of a bigger problem. For example, lack of parking spaces is not a problem of not enough parking spaces and not enough smart solutions to show to the client, to the populace where to park, but it's a problem of mobility and an integrated transportation system and so on. So how do you perceive the implementation of smart city solution, the city's preparation to implement smart city solution?
Again, me. Okay. This is a problem because we have a huge promise about the smart city solution, that they will resolve all the problems. And of course it is a lie. But as always, someone who produced the smart city technology needs to sell it. And if you have to sell it, you need to create a story about that. And this is normal thing. And the opposite side, like if we're talking about local governments that they need to implement something or resolve huge problems, you know, they have a very hard and twist position because they already knew that they have a huge problem about our cities, like urban sprawl, this focus on the car or individual cars, like are the main way of transportation, the housing problem, and so on. And they already knew that, but people expect from them that they do something about that, and they can't do that. They couldn't do that because of the law, regulation, and so on. It's very complicated things. And for example, you know, how to resolve urban sprawl right now when, you know, the main government or government are preparing some kind of law that allows you to build home without any permission, any bureaucracy, and any control. So you can build everywhere you want. So that helps sprawl, you know, to grow. So they just, you know, buy some kind of smart city technology because they need to do something. And maybe if they buy something that cure the symptoms of the problems, that something will change, because maybe we will get the knowledge, we will not have the data, and then someone will be convinced that we need to take care of the main problem, not the symptoms. But of course, like in every other sphere, we have a lot of marketing, we have a lot of PR, and we have a lot of dreams that never come to true because, as you said before, we have a smart city solution, but we don't have smart cities. We don't have smart city hall. We have a lot of obstacles on our way, but we need to live with that, and we need to do something with that. So, you know, this is not a huge step in the future, but it's a small steps, and maybe some of them are like mistakes or something like that. We shouldn't do that.
I think 50% of the time it's just law constraints. They want to do something, but they're constrained by law. For example, moving on to the other question, how startups are playing a role in these developments. I would like to ask Vadim. So again, how startups are playing a role in this smart city development, and how can we cope with one of the main problems for startups, public tenders for in city halls?
That's a very interesting question. I've been thinking a lot about this, and startups are very necessary for the smart cities and cooperation with large corporates, because founders of the startups are usually the problem solvers. Because if you are sitting inside the corporation, inside the city, inside the government, usually you don't see, or you don't want to see, what are the problems in your organization. So the startups is something from the outside which is coming to you like early and saying, hey, we see a problem with poor air, we see that people are not getting data, and we want to solve this. So it's very important for the governments, for the local governments, to be open towards the cooperation with startups. And we have a few very successful use cases here in Poland where we saw how the local governments wanted to solve their real problems. For instance, the city of Sosnowiec in Poland, they see that they have problems with the medical deliveries, with the AED deliveries, and they started looking for startups, and they made a huge amount of work on the legislation side, on the technology side, to prepare the city to implement the smart drone solutions, for instance. And right now, based on the use case, we see more and more cities are gaining this momentum, and trying to start solving their real problems using the solutions of the startups.
And Vadim, from your experience, I have to ask, is it easier to work and cooperate with larger municipalities or smaller cities?
I would say it depends, because we've been cooperating both with the large cities like the city of Warsaw and with smaller cities like Rzeszów and Sosnowiec. And it depends from which perspective you're looking at, because the smaller cities, they are faster to innovate, they are faster to implement the solutions, and it's easier to get to the decision maker to see what the real problem is. But the problem with the smaller cities is the budget, because small cities usually have a way longer road to get the money either from the government or from the European Commission to implement the solution. So it depends. Small cities are good for the POCs to try the solution to see what are the real problems, but big cities are they have just bigger budgets, and from the startup perspective, it's easier to scale up the solution.
But it's very hard to make a proof of concept in one city, another city, and 3 or 4 cities. You're always making proof of concept. So how to break this barrier of making only proof of concepts and move into, for example, so to say, a introduction to the whole country. So like selling a product, starting in public tenders. Are you still not? What do you think? How to break this barrier?
Yeah, this is a very, very important question. I think because we seem to be putting 2 types of problems into one bucket, and I wanted to start with sort of making that distinction. There are simple problems in cities. Something cannot get easily from point A to point B. That's a simple problem, right? We need to sort of find a way to move goods, for example. But there are also complex problems, systems problems, which like pollution, like mobility. They are not simple problems. So for simple problems, when you develop a solution, it's almost context blind, right? It doesn't matter if it's a big city or it's a small city. If the problem is simple in its structure, then the solution can be applied all across. If the problem is one of complex problems, then it's very context specific. Then it's very difficult to simply copy and paste, right? And thus to mainstream, to sell more broadly, because different elements of complexity will stand in your way, basically. So I think recognizing that from the onset is critical for startups, because if you want to have a solution that requires very little customization and can be easily implemented in many different contexts, you should be looking at problems or at solving problems that are almost context blind. I mean, you cannot be context blind totally, but to a large extent you can. In the context of simple problems. When you look at complex problems, you're investing in solutions that will require a ton of customization, thus will be super costly, but they can also have different types of margins. So I think we need to investigate these somewhat separately. And of course, we are somewhat giving bad press to cities at this point, saying that they are slow to innovate. But this is the context, exactly the context they're in right now. I know several years ago there were some attempts to make this cooperation between startups and public administration easier and more open. And I think this is something that is quite critical. If you're a startup and if you can find a space, be it problem space, be it geographic space, in which you can have a very open cooperation before the purchase, before the implementation, then you stand quite a big chance to actually make a solution that fits, that is a very good proof of concept, and that can actually allow you to develop your startup idea and become profitable. Unfortunately, from what I've observed so far, there is very little co-creation and co-design before purchase happens in many cities in the region, mostly because the law doesn't really make that space. You cannot really co-design and then sell a solution that is a costly one. And at the same time, you should
I think that
design a
the law
costly solution.
constraints are very important, but I think the law constraints are usually misunderstood by cities because they're not that very strict. You can sell, you can sell to a city and the city can buy without a public tender up to a price quotation, but they usually don't do it. They are somewhat of afraid to buy something without a public tender, and they are afraid to work with startups. They're afraid of some kind of weird types of accusations. So, Artur, what's your opinion?
Okay, the first point is that let's forget about the size of the city. I think its size doesn't matter because it's the smart city technology in Poland, in our cities. It's all about the people. People, also from the city hall, but from the startups as well. City hall. There's a plenty of city clerks who are looking for innovation, and they are eager, to trust to any people, any group, any company, any business, and any startups. They find a way to make something faster, better, and so on. And as I said before, the whole branch of technology that put sensor in the sewer system and so on, it's boring because it's obvious. You have data that we invest that kind of money and we get that kind of money in the savings or resources or something like that. And it's boring because it's Excel and end of the story. But if you dealing with the small problem or bigger problem in the city, for example, how to use technology in field of climate crisis, and how to use technology that could help us with the improvement of city resilience. So this is a very complex situation, and I cannot imagine that some startups could work out some solution without cooperation with the city. And of course, as you said, our law, it's complicated, but not so much. And I think it's a huge sphere of the area of cooperation that the city could use before they purchase the whole technology. But there's the problem about who owns the technology, later who owns the profits, how we share the profits, and so on.
IP rights transfer.
Yes,
code
and
transfer,
of course. But then, of course, there's a lot of people at the city hall who doesn't understand why they should do something in different way that they used to do before. For example, there's plenty of people who work for city hall like 20, 25 years, and they see everything in the city. So, new solutions. Why? And this is the problem from as I said, the people from the startups perspective, because time to time they are not really good with explaining how the solutions work and how they improve their work and how we can use it in the better profit. Because every technology needs some kind of story that stay behind this technology, and the story should be convincing why we should use the technology. And then, of course, if you have a good solution and good story and good training program for all the people who should be involved in that it's easier. And of course, about startups, of course, it's hard for them because startups are something new and they have done experience, like a legal experience that they provide a solution for cities like 5 years before. So some condition in the kind of business, doing business with the city, but. There's
this can be an advantage or a disadvantage.
Of course,
right?
of course. But sometimes it's an obstacle. But there's a lot of right now in Poland, like of hackathons and program that, for example, some companies or government funds, like a Polish development funds, they just support and invite people from the city hall, people from startups, and tell them, okay, do something together, and we will pay for the first stage of implementing or making the proof of efficiency. And I think right now it's a good atmosphere for that, and we'll see in the future how it's really works, because right now everything is possible from my perspective.
I think the market is developing very fast. And Vadim, a direct question to you. How is it? How is, Artur talked about the right people. When I actually had the pleasure to work for a state-owned company, a railway company, and I was responsible for introducing innovations. And now I went out to the market and asked around which technology should we use and so on. They were actually surprised that some guy from a public state-owned company asks those questions and wants to know and wants to cooperate. That was 5 years ago, so I think a lot of change. And Vadim, what is your experience of working with the cities? Are they open? Do you always reach the right people? What is the real life experience of a startup in a smart city environment?
I would say it's always about the people because, well, it really depends because we started our business model from trying to cooperate with the cities. It was 6 years ago, 7 years ago, and it didn't really succeed because at that time most of the cities didn't have a special venture inside the local government to cooperate with the startups, with the small cities to look for the innovation, or at least we were not able to find those right entities. Right now, it's easier, but again, as I mentioned, as somebody before mentioned, there are lots of hackathons, there are lots of different places where cities are started looking for the solutions which can help them to innovate. And again, I would say that the size of the city matters, and I don't know the one only reason for that, but I would say that it's easier to work with the smaller cities because smaller cities want to prove something. They want to show that they are innovative. They want to show that they can do something which matters. And the city of Rzeszów, where our company was originally located, is a perfect example of this because the city mayor, which was for I believe 15 years, has developed the city from the small city that mostly nobody really cared about to the one of the most known cities in Europe in the aviation and robotics industry. So, and this is, as you asked, it's all about the person because this was the guy who wanted to do the innovation, who wanted to show that his city can do something and can be better than the Warsaw, Krakow, Poznań, the largest Polish cities.
Okay, so thanks. So we already established that we have a smart city solution environment in place. The local governments are trying to, like Vadim said, are trying to actively cooperate with startups. And another question is, in what particular areas do you think that startups can bring value to a city, to a municipality, to build a smart city? Justyna?
It's a tricky question because I think it's a context specific question. It is quite context specific. There are things that might be safe bets, more or less, which would be very tightly linked to major trends that are impacting cities. So if you look at things that no matter the size of the city will have an impact over the next 10, 15, 20 years on our cities, then you can treat that as an area in which you can innovate. And climate change is an obvious one, but there's also mental health in cities. And how do you basically support local communities in maintaining their mental health, but also how do you help the city almost enter that space? We're very it's very nascent in Poland, for example, to discuss it's a very nascent field that would discuss how the way municipality organizes the city, how our cities are being built, rebuilt, and so on, how it all impacts the mental health of people living there, their well-being. It's all very new. So if you can enter this field with very basic initial offerings that help jointly investigate that and jointly start building more and more advanced solutions that improve the well-being of citizens and their health, then I think it's one of these areas in which the demand is going to be growing. But that requires, one, your recognition of in your knowledge around trends and really solid knowledge, so that you don't invest in things that are fads or will die out over the next 5 years. Second, you need to recognize the context, and this goes back to what gentlemen were saying, Vadim and Arthur were saying, that it all comes down to people. From my experience, the more connections you can make in municipalities to better understand the context, the easier for you it's going to be to really make the connection and create the solutions.
I think that's one of the most important points, that cities should better understand the context, because there are a lot of solutions in cities. In Wrocław, for example, we have the ITS, which is the Intelligent Transport System. We have electronic systems for parking and a lot of different smart city solutions. But I think that the cities oversee one crucial thing. They have a bunch of data in a bunch of silos, but they do not combine those data. What do you think?
Cities are built on silos, so we don't have to be surprised that the data is also built on silos. But this is all about that, how you imagine the future of the city, and how you imagine and define the development. Because if you thinking, okay, we need to a system that allow us to move faster with our cars, because this is how we imagine the future, and it used to be the definition of the future like 15 years ago. So then you invest in that kind of system, and of course that doesn't work, and we know right. This is that right now, but as always, as Vadim told, the city sometimes needs something to show off. They need a proof that they are innovative. They are just following the world trends. Because it's not because of that the mayor or local clerks really need that. They think that they do that because they are under press, that this press is sourced by the journalists in the public opinion. So we have a wrong definition. All of us have a wrong definition about development and so on. But it's changing right now, and we have a lot of new ideas, new opportunities, to make people more focus on quality of life in every sphere. But then the problem is how to use technology in that kind of field, because how to make people convince, to use the technology for that. And of course, they're trying. For example, Warsaw has this kind of app. It's 19109. 19115 in Poland, 19115, that allows you, for example, to report illegal car parking. But then, and it's super fast, and you can fight with the better quality of space through that tool. But then, of course, you have you get a mail from the civic guard asking about some data, addresses, because they want to send you a paper version of your digital photo or something like that, and this is the problem. Another thing is that I think the city hall should invest more about using I could call it like because the city has kind of trust, and all of app like Uber or Airbnb allows us to work with strangers, before we never do that. And Uber is kind of, Uber sells a trust that if something goes wrong with the cooperation with stranger, the Uber will cover the cost and they will take care of that.
Yeah, there's someone always responsible.
Yeah, so the city hall should copy that and tell, okay, if you want to do something in your neighborhood, for example, share a tool with the neighbors, with strange people and cooperate with them, for example, sharing cars with them. We are here to provide some trust. And if something goes wrong, we are here to help you to solve the question, the issue. And I expect that the city hall will go that way, and they use their positions, they respect, to allow local communities to use technology on their own and not afraid, to use technology to cooperate with strangers. And if they do that, it's gonna be fine.
I think that in Poland we tend to trust in private companies more than our local governments or the government itself. So But I have a question, a tricky question again. Is it possible to introduce smart cities without the involvement of the local government?
Of course. Of course.
How?
But we
It's already going on, but
we already
I
have
need to
that.
know your opinion.
We already have that. For example, when and the first phase of pandemic, there was, I think it took several days. Some people create a Facebook profile, like Helpful Hand or something like that. It was all about technology, and it's all about people. So people organize themselves and they use data and they gathering data and they share information about who needs help and so on. They do excellent job without any local government. And for example, in New York, during Katrina thunderstorms, they do that same. They don't use the very complicated tools for cooperating, sharing information. They use a Google spreadsheet. Just to map people who needs help and people who offer some help. So yes, we could build smart city without local government in the field of cooperating between people. But of course, it need to be simple, need to be fast, and need to be right in the context. So this is important.
I think the thing is that sometimes local governments should just not interfere. Let the people develop their own solutions, cooperate, let the companies in, just don't interfere and support us as far as they can. And Justina, what do you think? Is it possible to build a smart city without the involvement of the city?
If we mean public officials, then yes, I think to
Yeah.
some extent. I mean, I agree with what Artur said. I think, especially in the times of crisis, we see citizens and private companies developing almost like shadow systems, shadow copies of the official systems. If you have, I don't know, a system to provide support to the vulnerable groups that is managed by the municipality, but it's dysfunctional in a specific case, then the community and the technology step in and create a shadow version of that is more effective, that is easier to use, and it basically works in parallel to the official system. I think the question is, because these things are happening, just as Artur said, there's it's happening in the care area, it's happening in the environmental area, it's happening in the mobility area. There are cities that started developing their own mobility apps only then to recognize that there are already existing mobility apps that are used by more people in the city that the solution that the municipality provided. So of course this is happening, this is developing in parallel. The question is, how do we bridge these? How do we pick the ones that are more effective and share the ownership? Because this is a long road for us. This is a question of how do you actually build synergies between these shadow systems and the official systems?
Okay, thank you. Vadim, I have two last questions for you because we are already running out of time. We focused on the smart city market in Poland. And how do you perceive cross-border adoption, Vadim? Is it easier? Are the problems and solutions needed the same in Poland like in the whole Central Eastern Europe region? What do you think?
It depends. I can say only about the business I'm doing, the drones, because up until 2020, it was almost impossible to scale up our solutions to other European countries because every single EU state had its own local policies regarding the drones, regarding the autonomous flights. So basically, if we wanted to sell our solution to Germany, 99% of our time would be fighting with local governments and trying to persuade them that they can use it legally. On January 1st, 2020, the regulations changed, and right now there is a clear EU Sky regulation, which basically requires all the member states to have the same rules for the drones, for the autonomous flights in the whole European Union. Of course, there are countries that adopted it better, there are countries that adopted it worse. And Poland, I would say, is in the top 3 in the whole European Union while adopting it. But from my perspective and from perspective of other companies that are working in the regulated business, it becomes easier and easier because the European Union is given something very unique. It's given the same and clear regulations for all the countries, for all the companies operating on the EU terrain, and you can also see it on the charges for the EV vehicles. If you go to the US and you want to charge a Tesla, there are like 6 different standards of the chargers, and in the European Union, fortunately, there is only 1 or 2 because the EU worked very hard to regulate it and push the standards. So, summing up, I would say for my business, it was hell until 2020, but right now we have such a great push for scalability and for selling our solutions abroad that we have a different problem. We have way more clients that we can work with.
So sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's easy. We already talked about the people behind the on the side of the smart city of the local governments, but I want to ask you a last question. What values or attributes should a founder of a startup have to be successful?
There are only 2 kind of values. First of all, the founder should always remember that after the darkest night there is a sunrise, and the startups are always about crisis. You're going from one problem to another, and the most important thing is not to give up. And I would say that's the only thing that the founder should have, because you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You can hire the people who are way smarter, way more intelligent than you in sales, technology, and marketing, but you should be the leader, the one who will drive them through in the darkest night. And this is the most important thing that the founder should have. And the second, you need to have your own values, because at this darkest night, those are the only thing that can push you forward, because there will be nobody else to give you support.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, we are running out of time. So thank you for this interesting discussion. I think to sum up that I think we can see that there's a lot of potential in the smart city market. There are a lot of startups. There are ways and to start those startups to be introduced into live proof of concept or already being development production. So and the climate of the city is really changing. They want to they want to develop new solutions, and I think we have a bright future for any startup that is working for smart city. Thanks.